Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eleanor Nichovater and this is my very belated June wrap-up. It's very belated because on the 6th of July I tested positive for COVID-19 and I was quite ill with it, and I'm still dealing with some of the side effects coming up to 3 weeks after testing positive. I'm doing a lot better than what I was, but I'm still having some breathing issues because I have asthma. So if I seem quite breathless and like I've been running, that's kind of why. It also means I haven't been making any videos, and this is me trying to get back into videos this week. And when eventually you see my July wrap up, you'll see that I have read nothing in July. So this June wrap up will have to tide you over with what I've read lately. And I'm quite thankful that I was quite ahead on my reading challenge for the year, so that I don't feel like I've got a lot of catching up to do. And I'm sure you can also tell by the background that it's quite different. Right before I fell ill, I was reorganising all my bookshelves. I now have 3 bookshelves instead of 2. So I have these both here and then another one here. So now I have more room to spread all my books out, and I've reorganised them all. The next video you'll see will be my organisation of all this, and you can see how I organised it all. And I've got all the footage sped up, but that'll be the next video. I just thought this would be a better video to come first and explain where I've been. So this is a sneak peek for my new filming setup, which is quite nice that it's in the corner. I think it's just a bit more interesting. And I love these bookshelves, so a bit of fun. So I thought I would just get straight into what I read in June. The first book I read was To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is a kind of precursor book to the Wayfarers series and is set a very, very long time in the past for that series, but in our not too distant future, if that makes sense. It's a very, very short novella, but Becky Chambers is just so brilliant with how she writes her science fiction and how she writes space exploration and all these different kind of species and worlds, and she has such diverse characters and they're just so lovely. This is only my second time reading this, but I always fly through really short novellas like this, especially if they're science fiction and they're so engaging. So yeah, I very much loved rereading this, and yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful cover as well, this lovely orange. Yeah, quite out of breath. This is my first kind of thing I'm doing that's vaguely bringing an effort since I felt ill. I'm off work at the moment and I can tell that I'm still struggling and I'm not 100% better yet. The next book I read in June was Killer Instinct by James Patterson. This is the second book, the first book being Murder Games, and it's the second book in a kind of new series, and you're following Alan Reinhardt, and who is like a professor at an Ivy League university, and he gets teamed up with a detective and they start solving kind of crimes. I enjoyed this. It's very fast paced. For me it's just kind of crime fluff, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like you have your somebody beach reads. This kind of feels like that to me. You don't take it too seriously, and it just reads like a bad TV show, which, you know, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it, and I did enjoy it. Don't take them too seriously, and I enjoyed this one a bit more than the first one. Had more going on. The plot was a bit more interesting, and the characters just were more developed than they were in the first book, and yeah, just mindless, like rubbish. It's not really what I would normally pick up, but I did like the TV show, and I don't know why I'm doing this with a book. I'm out of practice with filming, but I did like the TV show that was cancelled after 2 seasons, Instinct, and in my head I just picture the actors and actresses that were in that show when I'm reading this. So it's just a really fast pace. Each chapter is like 2 pages and it just reads like a TV show. So much is not explained, and it just reads like a script in that way. But I did have fun and I enjoyed it, but it's definitely not a book I would ever read again. The next few books I'm going to talk about kind of together because they're part of the same series, and it is the Books of Pelinor by Alison Croggon. The first book I'll mention kind of individually. This is the only book that wasn't a reread for me, and it's The Bone Queen. This came out in 2016, probably a full 10 years before the original quartet came out, and I didn't pick up at the time because I was older and I wasn't as involved with the book community then and keeping track of authors and their new releases, so I didn't realise this existed. But I have owned it for a few years and I haven't got around to reading it. But I love this prequel. It was so different from the original quartet, and normally you would maybe read this after, but because I read the original 4 books, I wanted to read this first and then do a reread of the series with this new information kind of in my brain, and I thought that would be a fun way to enjoy the series. I believe now that it's marketed, the series, as this being the first book, and now there's 5 books in the series and this is the first book and then you've got the other 4. I'm not quite sure why that's been changed or anything like that, but I really enjoyed this. You follow the character Cadvan, lots of names that I'm not sure how I pronounce them, but I'm just going for it. There is like a kind of pronunciation guide at the start of the books for how to pronounce all these characters, but I'm not very good at following those kind of things anyway. You just kind of make up your own versions. Getting distracted. You're following Cadvan about when he's a young man, about 40 or 50 years before you follow him in the later series, and you're following him when he does something really, really bad and he has to kind of atone and make up for what he's done. And he was like lauded as like a great magician, bard of his generation, and he ends up in exile because of this mistake, and he spends the whole book trying to make up for what he's done. This thing is alluded to in this original series, but it was so great to kind of see from his point of view what happened and what was the origin of his story and where he began as a very young man. I love this series. It's high fantasy done very, very well. The world is so vivid and rich. You can imagine it being a real place. The characters are so well written, they're so flawed and complex, and you do see how much they change and grow throughout the whole series. And this is definitely a place that I would love to visit and love to be a magic person, bard, in this place. So good. Cadvan's story is just so different from Merad's, and you see the magic worked in such a different way that you don't see in the later series, and I just think it adds so much depth and history to this world, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. You also see the beginnings of some friendships that you see then echoed in this later series, and it's fun to see them in their beginning stages, and yeah, I loved it so much. I will be doing kind of full-on series review video where I go in more depth, but that probably won't be happening anytime soon. I'm just kind of trying to play catch up just now, and I will want to gather my thoughts more so about this series before talking about it even more. So then I only managed to read the next 3 books in the series in June, and I finished the 4th book in July, at the start of July. So the other 3 books I got read was The Gift, The Riddle and The Crow. I believe The Gift is called The Naming in America. I think there was an issue with the name sounding too similar to something else. But The Gift, The Riddle, The Crow is the first 3 books in the Pelinor quartet. And you're following Merad. And this is a reread, as I said, but I love coming back to this series. You can see that my edition is very battered. You can see that my edition is very battered and some of the pages are even almost falling out. The spine is very broken. It's a much beloved series of mine, and I'm sure Abbey of Pelinor will agree with me here on BookTube that this is a fantastic series, and if you didn't read it at the time when these were out, they are a very classic staple book of their time, and they are very much something that you should be read as young adult high fantasy. It's such a gateway book for me when I was younger, and it really opened up the world of high fantasy to me, and I love these characters. Merad is such a strong, empowering female character, and the journey she goes on as she grows into being a young woman, the mistakes she made, the character growth she has, is just so brilliant, and I loved it so much. I still even love it very much now when I'm so much older. And I think this is a timeless fantasy series, and I think everyone should pick it up. And if you haven't, this is your encouragement to read it. You start off following Merad, who is a slave, and she doesn't realise that she is a bard and has magic, and that she was kind of kidnapped and sold into slavery when her village was like ransacked when she was a child. Cadvan, who you have met in the Bone Queen, rescues her when he's having a big plight, and there's a big struggle with the dark. Merad turns out to be special and has great magical kind of abilities, and they just go on this big quest and find lots of amazing friends and family along the way. I love this series as well because it's one of the only series I've read that really incorporates music into like the storytelling, and it's such a huge focal point. Both Merad and Cadvan play lyres and are brilliant singers, and all throughout the series and books there's songs and music and poems that have been collected from this time, because the author wrote this series like she was actually doing real historical research on a long forgotten civilization. So that just gives it a very unique feel to the series. And I just love the incorporation of music, because it's not something you see very often, because it is hard to incorporate into a written form. It's not something I know, but if you've read this series and you've listened to an audiobook, are the songs and poems like done musically? How does that work? I don't know. It's just something I thought of just there. If you've listened to the audiobook of this series, let me know. I'd love to maybe listen to them myself if that's the case. I think it would add a whole new depth to the reading experience. And the final book I read in June was Chosen by PC and Kristen Cast, the third book in the House of Night series, and I read this as part of the Redbird read-along. I think there's only a couple of people doing it, but I'll leave the hosts down below. They're doing live shows every month for each book, and this was the one for June. And this is a very nostalgic series for me. It is very problematic because it was mid-2000s, lots of words and terminology that you would not be using nowadays. But I loved the kind of vampire system and magic system of this series. I thought it was so clever. Vampire Finishing School. I loved all the different elements, and the characters just bring me straight back to being like 12 again, 14 again, and going through my big vampire reading phase. So I'm enjoying reading this series again. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it nowadays unless you can look past all the problematic things now. But yeah, this is just the third in the series, so I can't really say too much about it. But again, you're following Zoe, Redbird, at the House of Night, and more things are going down with her vampire friends and at the school, and she's got more boy drama, and it's ridiculous, but I'm loving this read along so much. Here is my bullet journal for June, and all the books I read, what I rated them, and my reading frequency. And I'm sure you'll come back maybe in a week or two, a week and a half, not even, to see my July wrap up, and you'll see how empty this page is. So I'm glad I read so much in June to make up for my lack of reading that's happened in July. But I really thoroughly enjoyed my reading month of June, and I hope this wrap up was okay. And some of the books have fallen out of my head, as I've just now realised when I held up my bullet journal just there. There's a book I haven't mentioned that I forgot to talk about because I read it on my Kindle, and that was Network Effect by Martha Wells, which is the fifth book in the Murderbot Diaries series. This is a series of novellas, but this fifth book, Network Effect, was the first kind of full-length novel Martha Wells wrote, and it's the fifth book in the series, so I can't say too much about it. But I thoroughly enjoy this series. Murderbot is an excellent character. They have so much sass, and I love their personality and the way they interact with the people around them and the friends they make. It's just so much fun. So yes, that is now finally the end of the video. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments. I know this is a very delayed video, so thank you for watching this far if you have done. This is a longer video just because I had to update on a few things. But yes, the next video you'll see will be out in 2 or 3 days, and it will be the organisational video of all my books. It's going to be a longer video, even though I'm going to speed up the footage, but yeah, I'm hoping you look forward to that. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.